The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
we are now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Wednesday, June 7, 2017. Thanks so much for joining what I believe to be the most efficient team in independent media. The things that we get done in the time frame that we get it done in, I have to give ourselves a round of applause because the Benjamin Dixon Show Progressive Army team, we get it done in a most spectacular fashion. And I say that to say, if you're not supporting the most efficient team in independent media, why not? What's going on? Go to patreon.com/the BPD show and help us become even more efficient. Help us to do even more. Help us to expand our team even further. Every dime that you give, every dollar that you give, we squeeze every penny out of it in a very spectacular fashion. So your return on investment definitely can be seen in everything that we do here. There's a lot of news going on today, so allow us to jump in at this point in today and tomorrow. Tomorrow may shape out to be one of the most important days for the world, not in world history, and I won't dare be that hyperbolic, but in contemporary history right now. Tomorrow is the elections in the UK. Tomorrow is a testimony by James Comey with regards to President Trump. We have the preview of his statement that was released. We'll discuss that. But before we get to that, let's talk about what happened in Iran today. There was an attack where at least 12 people were killed in two simultaneous attacks, both claimed by ISIS in Tehran, Iran. There were 46 people wounded. The attack started this morning at 10:30 a.m. local time and didn't end until the mid-afternoon. The first attack was occurred at the Parliament building. Lawmakers were inside of the building when a suicide bomber detonated his vest inside of the building. There were three other terrorists who had rifles with them, killing people before they eventually killed themselves. And again, this is ISIS has taken responsibility for it. There were 11 people who were killed at the Parliament building. One attacker left, according to New York Times, one attacker left the Parliament after an hour and ran outside shooting in Tehran streets. Then he returned to the building. This is all happening simultaneous with a second attack. Now we have a video of the second attack that occurred at the tomb of Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the founder of the Islamic Republic. Let's take a quick look at the video that we have of the second attack. And there you can see the explosion that took place and the ensuing gunfight. And this again was at the tomb. You can see it from the AP at the top. It was the mausoleum of the Imam. They refer to him as the Imam Ayatollah Khomeini. The two assailants entered the west wing of the compound. One attacker detonated explosives. The explosives killed one individual, and another was reported to have been killed himself by the other attacker, killed himself by swallowing a cyanide pill. So the terrorists carried out this attack. It was one man and two terrorists, one man and one woman who carried out that attack. There's another video that we don't have, but the Islamic State, or ISIS, released a 24-second video showing the bloodied body of a man laying in the Parliament building while the gunman shouted, particularly in Arabic, he said, "Thank God. Do you think that we are going to leave? We will remain here, God willing." The current supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, slightly different than Khomeini, the tomb that was attacked. Khamenei stated today, the Iranian nation is moving forward and advancing. Even these firecrackers that were set off today will not impact our nation's will. Everyone must know this. The Speaker of the Parliament called the attacks a minor incident, and the Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps appeared. They blamed Saudi Arabia and the United States for what happened today. In addition to the response from the current Supreme Leader, Khamenei, and the Speaker of the Parliament there were other statements issued across the globe. The one I want to bring up is the statement from the White House, from our president, President Trump. I'll bring it up on your screen now. This is what he said. He said, "We grieve and pray for the innocent victims of the terrorist attack in Iran and for the Iranian people who are going through such challenging times. We underscore that states that sponsor terrorism risk falling victim to the evil they promote." Yeah, that is the President of the United States, who could not take a moment to have sympathy with the Iranian people, for those people who were killed today by ISIS. I mean, you would think that he would seize upon this to promote the same narrative that he always promotes in terms of radical Islamic terrorism. But he could not do it without making the distinction of his feelings about Iran, saying, you know, they're a sponsor of state terrorism, and essentially they're going to reap what they have sown. Now, Iran has no good feelings about the United States in general, particularly the religious component of the government, not the secular government, but the supreme leader. They don't have a endearing view or a favorable view of the United States. However, I want you to listen to the tone that Iran took after 9/11 towards the United States. First of all, after 9/11, 60,000 people gathered and observed a minutes of silence in Tehran's soccer stadium. And Mohammad Khatami, he's the fifth president of Iran. This is what he said. He said, although the American administrations have been at best indifferent about terrorist operations in Iran since 1979, the Iranians instead felt differently and had expressed their sympathetic feelings with bereaved Americans in the tragic incidents in the two cities. And even the Supreme Leader, Khamenei, condemned and denounced the attacks and the terrorists who carried out the attacks. And so where Iran, who feels about America similar to the way that America feels about Iran, where Iran was able to look at America and say, yeah, we have our differences, but we grieve with you today. Donald Trump says, while we grieve with you today, you're getting what you brought this on yourself, essentially. But we're dealing with a very, I don't know how many times are we going to have to say this between now and the end of his term, or 4 years, 2 years, impeachment, whatever. Between now and the end of this term, we're going to have to say it over and over again that we're dealing with a man-child who's incapable of operating at the level that we expect of the office of the President of the United States. You can join the conversation and weigh in on the discussion by leaving us a voicemail, 857-600-0518, or you can leave comments in the comments section in Twitter, YouTube, or Facebook, and we will curate those comments and bring them and incorporate them into our show live on air. So two things major happening with the FBI today. Let me hit the least interesting one first. Trump has finally picked his next director of the FBI. According to the New York Times, Trump on Wednesday announced via Twitter, of course, that he has selected Christopher Wray to be his FBI director. Wray spent some time in the Department of Justice over a decade ago. He was a part of the Department of Justice at the time that they investigated Enron around 2005. But more recently, Ray was the attorney who had defended Governor Chris Christie in the New Jersey Bridgegate scandal. I don't know if you recall that, but this is a scandal where it appeared as though Chris Christie shut down a portion of a bridge as political retribution. And Ray participated or was the attorney who defended Chris Christie. A little bit of background on Ray. He graduated from Yale University in 1989, earned his law degree from Yale in 1992. He was a former assistant attorney general overseeing the Justice Department's criminal division underneath George W. Bush. He was the head of the criminal division from 2003 to 2005, and that's when he was involved in an investigation of Enron. He has been a committed Republican donor to Republican candidates over the years. Over the past decade, he has contributed about $35,000 to Republicans, either directly to candidates or to respective committees. This is a quote from the National Political Director of the ACLU, Faiz Shakir. He says, Christopher Wray's legal firm work for the Trump family, firm's legal work for the Trump family, his history of partisan activity, as well as his history of defending Trump's transition director during a criminal scandal, makes us question his ability to lead the FBI with independence, even-handed judgment, and commitment to the rule of law that the agency deserves. And this is particularly important right now, considering the implications of the independence that James Comey tried to have. The question is now going in post James Comey, in the middle of an independent investigation into alleged collusion with Russia, to what extent can this Christopher Wray be independent enough not to himself obstruct justice and not to interfere with the investigation that should be independent? One thing that Donald Trump is looking for, and we'll discuss that when we discuss James Comey, Donald Trump wants loyalty. He wants someone that he can dictate his terms to and have them abide by it. And it appears as though he's found that finally, probably now on the fourth string, he's found that in Christopher Wray because of his committed, dedicated contributions to Republicans over the years. That can't be understated. So he's clearly going to come in with a political leaning. The question is, can Christopher Wray transcend his political ideology and operate as an independent investigative leader of an investigative branch of the executive branch? That's the question. The reality of it is Donald Trump does not want him to do that. We actually have statements from James Comey that we're going to go over in a minute that demonstrates that Donald Trump has no desire to have an independent director of the FBI. Donald Trump wants loyalty. And so the real question that has to be answered is whether or not Christopher Wray is able to be independent despite the reality of the pressures that he's going to face from from President Donald Trump. All right, let's talk about what's going on tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow, James Comey is going to be testifying before the Senate. Today, he released his opening statement to the public, including copies of his memos, the memos that were previously leaked. And he shared all of this information today. I don't know if it was to soften the blow of what's going to happen tomorrow, but the memos and all the information that James Comey released today actually confirms that the leaks that we got prior to this were accurate, were 100% accurate in terms of the memos. If we could take just a snapshot of what he's going to say tomorrow, he describes President Trump as someone who is eager to, quote, create some sort of patronage relationship over him. In other words, Trump wanted to rearrange the nature of their relationship such that even though he was not the FBI director that he appointed, he was not appointed by Trump, he would be beholden to Trump. And Donald Trump continued to try to get that type of relationship with James Comey. And we'll go statement by statement. There's actually 4 memos. And there's 2 memos, actually it's a 6 or 4, but there's 2 memos in particular that point out this demand for loyalty. And the second memo that we'll go over actually shows how close Donald Trump came to obstruction of justice. And it really just comes down to a legal question of whether or not it is a true obstruction of justice. So we're going to start with the January memo in which he was having dinner with President Trump, and we'll bring him up on your screen now. January 27th, he had a dinner for 2, and this is the memo that James Comey recorded afterwards. He said, "The president began by asking me whether I wanted to stay on as the FBI director, which I found strange because he had already told me twice in earlier conversations that he hoped I would stay, and I had assured him that I intended to. He said that lots of people wanted my job, and given the abuse that I had taken during the previous year, he would understand if I wanted to walk away. My instincts told me that the one-on-one setting and the pretense that this was an effort to have me ask for my job and create some sort of patronage relationship. That concerned me greatly given the FBI's traditionally independent status in the executive branch." He went on to say, a few moments later, the president said, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty." And this is where James Comey actually demonstrates his magnificent writing skills. He said, "I didn't move, speak, or change my facial expression in any way during the awkward silence that followed. We simply looked at each other in silence. I explained why it was so important that the FBI and the Department of Justice be independent of the White House. And finally, he said, near the end of our dinner, the president returned to the subject of my job, saying he was very glad that I wanted to stay. He then said, I need loyalty. I replied, James Comey replied, you will always get honesty from me. He paused and then said, that's what I want, honest loyalty. I paused and then said, you would get that from me. All right, so at the end of that memo, James Comey actually described that he's quite certain that Donald Trump interpreted the phrase honest loyalty completely different than he interpreted. They imbued two different meanings in that word. But he decided this was the best way to end an already awkward conversation. But this demonstrates that Donald Trump was looking for a loyalty oath. He was looking for an FBI director who was not going to be independent, but have an FBI director who was going to be beholden and acquiesce to the demands of the President of the United States. Not only the demands, but in some cases, the whims of the President of the United States. And James Comey clearly made the case that he felt that this was inappropriate. He felt like this was something that he could not commit to, but in order to end an awkward conversation, he went ahead and said that I'll give you that. That was conversation number one. That should set the framework of our thinking of this next, on our thinking for this next conversation that occurred in February. In February, in the Oval Office, he had a conversation with James Comey, and this is a portion of the memo that Comey recorded. He stated, the president signaled at the end of the briefing by thanking, or the president signaled the end of the briefing by thanking the group and telling them all that he wanted to speak to me alone. I stayed in my chair. As participants started to leave the Oval Office, the Attorney General lingered by my chair, but the president thanked him and said he wanted to speak only with me. When the door by the grandfather clock closed and we were alone, the president began by saying, I want to talk about Mike Flynn. The president began by saying Mike Flynn had done nothing wrong in speaking with the Russians, but he had let him go. He had to let him go because he misled the vice president. He is a good guy and has been through a lot. Trump then said, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. And this is Comey speaking. He said, I replied only that he is a good guy. I did not say I would let it go. I don't know what's next for James Comey, but he should actually start writing because he's that actually, those memos, these are his memos, right? They're actually compelling narratives. But more importantly than his writing prowess is the fact that this is the memo where it becomes a legal question. Was there actually obstruction of justice? We talk about a lot of times, it's not really the conspiracy itself that gets people, it's the cover-up of an alleged conspiracy. Because right now, as it stands, we have not seen any concrete evidence. We just see smoke. And generally, where there's smoke, there seems to be fire. But we have not seen any concrete evidence that is actionable enough for the Democrats to pursue impeachment. Believe me, if there was a solid enough evidence already, the Democratic Party would already have drawn up and signed articles of impeachment to the extent that they can in the minority. However, they're not there. And so this is a perfect example of Donald Trump possibly treading into the realm of doing something illegal to cover up an alleged conspiracy. And not, even in the broader sense, this is specifically talking about Michael Flynn, but Michael Flynn is directly connected to the ongoing relationships that seem to be improper, the ongoing improper relationships that the Trump administration had with Russians, with the Russian ambassador, and conversations that were out of turn, out of order, not done in the proper manner. And it's indicative of the type of environment that was fostered in the Trump administration, yet and still, it may not be any conversation that he had with the Russians, Michael Flynn or Jared Kushner or anyone in the administration. It could very well end up turning on the fact that Donald Trump attempted to use his authority as the president of the United States to influence the FBI director to no longer investigate Michael Flynn. Whether or not this is an actual case of obstruction of justice, that's a legal question. But the fact of the matter is, the leaks that were leaked several weeks ago confirm exactly what James Comey is going to testify to on tomorrow. Now, Comey understood the nature of what happened. He's going to go on to testify tomorrow that after he left, he jotted down this memo. And after recording this memo, he talked to the senior leadership at the FBI. And they decided two things. Number one, they were not going to influence or contaminate the people doing the investigation with any information that they just received from the president. In other words, the president wanted them to let it go. He was not going to pass this down to the people who were actually doing the investigation. That's number one. Number two, they realized the nature of the request from Donald Trump, but because it was essentially his word against Donald Trump's, there was no way to corroborate his memo. It was simply a memo. He understood that there was nothing he could actually do about it, and so he was not going to take this to the Attorney General to file a complaint. However, he recognized the nature of it was such that if there was some way to corroborate it, it would be something that he would file with the Attorney General, and obviously stating the obvious that that Jeff Sessions himself was going to have to recuse himself in this case. Like this is where we are, right? We're not talking about we're talking about the FBI director clearly seeing that the request being made by the President of the United States bordered something that if he was able to corroborate above and beyond his memo, it warranted filing a complaint with the Attorney General. Again, it's never the conspiracy, it's never the controversy, it's the cover-up of the controversy that generally gets people caught up. And it seems to be the case with Donald Trump. Last but not least in this memo was the fact that he was so uncomfortable with President Trump that he asked the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, to please make sure that he never has to be alone with the president again. This is actually documented in his statements. He was so uncomfortable with how Donald Trump made him feel. And I think more precisely, he was more uncomfortable with the things that Donald Trump was asking him to do. And where this is really great political fodder for us to laugh about Donald Trump having some type of personality that makes people uncomfortable and nobody wants to be around him privately. The reality of it is that this very well could be James Comey trying to protect the president of the United States, to make sure that he's not alone with him to make any other request that borderlines obstruction of justice. 857-600-0518 if you want to weigh in on the discussion. I think my prediction yesterday was wrong. I thought that this was not going to be a substantive hearing, but it seems like everything that he says is substantive, depending on whether or not it actually amounts to a legal obstruction of justice. So that's one of the reasons tomorrow is going to be a very significant day. Another reason tomorrow is going to be a significant day is because of the elections going on in the United Kingdom. We've been following it at a distance here across the pond, but on tomorrow, June 8th, Brits are going to head to the polls and elect 650 lawmakers across all over England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. This is as a result of Theresa May, the Prime Minister Theresa May, calling a snap election only 2 weeks ago. She did so hoping that she would be able to get larger parliamentary majorities to rely on while negotiating Brexit with the European Union over the next 2 years. This was the goal. However, it does not seem to. It may not work out the way that Theresa May actually wanted. She's going against Jeremy Corbyn, who is the leader of the Labour Party, and polls have shown some discrepancy. There are some polls that show Conservatives with a very large lead at the beginning of the campaign, but now that lead all the polls are showing that lead has dwindled, particularly among young people who registered to vote for the very first time. And so in a lot of ways, this campaign is shaping up to be a continuation of the global referendum on where are we going from here? Are we going to continue in the rightward swing, the global rightward swing that brought us Brexit, that attempted to bring us Marine Le Pen, that brought us Donald Trump, and Theresa May calling for an election, a snap election, has actually exposed perhaps the pendulum swinging back in the other direction. And so polls are showing that the lead has dwindled. In particular, Theresa May has not done herself any favors in this campaign. She has demonstrated that she, one, runs bad campaigns. That's number one, first and foremost. But then she actually has no ability to connect with regular people in the United Kingdom. Her campaign has been criticized for being, quote, stilted and soulless. Theresa May's been ducking debates, rarely attending events, sticking to scripts. One of the things that jumps out the most was when she had a conversation with a nurse, and the nurse told the Prime Minister about the struggles that she had been going through for the past 8 years. And Theresa May responded essentially that, there's nothing that they can do because money doesn't grow on trees. This is the real question is whether or not this is going to translate into at a minimum, a smaller majority in the parliament. Is her inability to run an efficient campaign and her inability to connect with the common person going to translate into larger majorities for the Labor? That's what matters the most. But in almost a tangential conversation, it's fascinating to see the things that the Conservatives are able to get away with, just brazenly get away with in the UK. And the question is, will the people rise up on tomorrow to make a statement against them? I mean, there's a couple of other things here that I want to run over. One of the most controversial proposals from the Conservative Party is being called the dementia tax. And this is an official Conservative policy plan to charge senior citizens more for social care. Now, after the backlash, Theresa May quickly dropped that proposal, insisting that it was not an about face. But in many ways, she was probably just floating a trial balloon to see if this is something that they can get away with. So while the polls there have varied wildly, some show a double-digit lead, Tory lead, and others pegging the Conservative advantage to just a single point. The reality of it is that it all comes down to who's going to show up tomorrow. Now, I have a video that I want to play of Theresa May that I think is the most alarming for two reasons. One, what she said, and two, how the crowd responded to what she said. This is in light of all of the terrorist attacks that have happened in the region and in the nation over the past few weeks. And it gives you insight into the reality that conservatives always benefit off of terrorism and fear. Conservatives always benefit off of terrorism and fear because it gives them the ability to push their agenda and to push the envelope on civil liberties, all in the sake of getting people safe or keeping people safe. This is the clip I want you to watch.
I mean longer prison sentences for those convicted of terrorist offences. I mean making it easier for the authorities to deport foreign terrorist suspects back to their own country. And I mean doing more to restrict the freedom and movements of terrorist suspects when we have enough evidence to know they are a threat, but not enough evidence to prosecute them in full in court. And if our human rights laws stop us from doing it, we'll change the laws so we can do it.
I'm sorry. That is so fascinatingly disturbing to me that she can, with a straight face, tell the audience, tell the nation, tell the kingdom that if our human rights laws prevent them from accomplishing what they want to accomplish with regard to suspected terrorists, they will change the human rights laws. The problem is this: many of the terrorists have been Britons. They're British. They're citizens. And so for them to change the human rights laws to affect suspected terrorists, for this to actually work, they're going to have to change the human rights laws for citizens in general who are not terrorists. And this is how it always begins. This is how you get you get your civil liberties tread upon in broad strokes, all because people are afraid of terrorism and leaders take advantage of that fear. And she said this to an audience that applauded her. That audience should have instantly booed her. But if there are any similarities that we could draw between the United States and the United Kingdom, it is that politics too often becomes a football sport, a team sport, where you're simply cheering for your team. Never mind what your team says, never mind what your team represents, never mind if your team does things that are detrimental to you. This is your team, these are your colors, and you're going to cheer whatever the hell that leader says. It's exactly the nature of American politics, and it seems to be the nature of politics in the UK if Theresa May is able to say things like this and get a round of applause instead of getting tomatoes thrown at her. But again, it's a play on the fear that is lingering in the community because of the terrorist attacks, but that speaks to the nature of conservatives across the globe. They thrive on terrorist attacks. They thrive on them. Not to say that they enjoy them. No, this is not to say that they are wagging the dog. This is not to say that they are doing any type of false flag. This is not to say anything conspiratorial. This is simply to say there is one group of politicians in the United States as well as the United Kingdom who benefit off of what they can accomplish after a terrorist attack. And it generally tends to be people who are of the conservative perspective and who have ties with defense contractors who create the weapons, who create the military, who create all of the tools used to fight back against terrorism. So what matters on tomorrow is whether or not Theresa May, all of her missteps, actually amount to a dwindling at a minimum. I mean, we want to see Jeremy, I don't know what you want to see. I want to see Jeremy Corbyn win. I want to see the Labour Party win. It's fascinating how much they've been able to gain ground just in these 2 weeks. But at a minimum, we want to see those majorities dwindle down to make it even more painful for Theresa May to accomplish any of these things, particularly changing the human rights laws so that they can crack down on suspected terrorists who just so happen to be citizens. Leave us your comments in the comments section on Twitter, Facebook, and or YouTube. Speaking of people on a video in a campaign who say things that you can't believe they actually said, here's a clip of the Georgia 6th Congressional District race between John Ossoff and Karen Handel. And I want you to listen to what Karen Handel said in response to the question about a livable wage.
Minimum wage.
This is an example of the fundamental difference between a liberal and a conservative. I do not support a livable wage. What I support is making sure that we have an economy that is robust with low taxes and less regulation, so that those small businesses that would be dramatically hurt if you impose higher minimum wages on them are able to do what they do best: grow jobs and create good paying jobs for people in the 6th district.
If she wins, and she just told Georgians whose minimum wage is $5.15 an hour, whose the state minimum wage is $5.15 an hour, yes, the federal minimum wage is $7.25, but you can't live off of $7.25 any more than you can live off of $5.15 an hour, even in Georgia, where the cost of living is a lot less expensive than here in Massachusetts. But if Karen Handel wins after saying that she openly does not support a livable wage, then damn it, the 6th district of Georgia, I hate to engage in this type of rhetoric, but they get exactly what they deserve. I mean, she's clearly telling you that this is what she believes this is the fundamental difference between a liberal and a conservative, liberal, whatever, and a conservative, that she does not, and she wears it as a badge of honor, that she does not support a livable wage. Translation, she doesn't care what your employer pays you, so long as it works out to the benefit of the employer. I mean, do we even need to get into the most basic economic theory? I'm talking about high school economic theory that suggests that you want to be able to pay your employees enough to live and enough to consume your product. I mean, it only makes sense that you would want people in your community to make enough money to be able to afford whatever the hell you're trying to sell. But what has happened over the last 30 years is that we've shifted, 30 plus years, is we've shifted the entire framework of our economy such that companies, big box companies, Walmarts of the world, do not have to pay a livable wage. And while it seems as though they would be missing an economic opportunity to make money off of employees who actually have more money to spend, it makes sense, right? I work at Walmart, I get my check, I need to buy stuff for my family, I go to Walmart. It would make sense that the more money their employees make, the more that they could spend. But the fundamental nature of our economic system has changed such now that Walmart does not have to pay. McDonald's, they don't have to pay a livable wage to still benefit off of their employees who don't make enough to live, because they teach their employees how to get food stamps. They teach their employees how to get welfare. They teach them how to live off the system. So now Walmart doesn't have to pay you enough to live. They just pay you enough to meet their profit margins, and everything else above that they can get from you, they get through food stamps. They get through all of your subsidies that you live off of. So Walmart is getting it coming and going. Not just Walmart, all of these businesses that are fixated with paying the lowest wage possible, they can do that because the government is complicit with them. The government allows socialism for corporations in the form of welfare and food stamps being funneled from taxpayers into the hands of corporations, because corporations won't pay their employees enough money to live. And Karen Handel is saying proudly, I don't support a livable wage. I'm not really a fan totally of Ossoff. But that's kind of irrelevant at this point, because at a minimum, we have to recognize the fundamental difference between someone who looks at the ideal, the very concept of a livable wage being an anathema to her political ideology, you have to look at that as being a distinctly different evil to fight against versus someone who, while he's not going to go over and above on behalf of labor, he is interested in pursuing livable wages pegged to the cost of living for the region. That is a distinct difference, and that election is coming up soon. I don't know what else to tell the people of Georgia other than you heard it from the source herself. I wanted to say the horse's mouth, but I'm sure somebody would make that problematic. So you heard it from the person herself. She does not support you having a livable wage. She supports you living hand to mouth and getting some subsidies. And then they're going to attack the subsidies. They're going to attack your wage and then blame you for working 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, and not making enough money and saying that you don't really deserve these food stamps. So anyway, I just don't understand why people can't see that clearly. 857-600-0518 if you want to join in on the discussion and weigh in on the conversation. Tomorrow night, we want you to be here, tomorrow at 3 p.m., not tomorrow night, but tomorrow at 3 p.m., here on the Progressive Army, Eastern Standard Time. Kirk Hackbarth and others are going to be reporting live. They're going to be reporting live for the election in the UK. They're going to be giving you live results, commentary, breaking news. So you want to definitely be a part of that. So come to my channel as well as Progressive Army on Twitter. We're going to do multiple streams on multiple channels. If you want to get live commentary and results here in the United States from a United States perspective, looking across the pond, then come tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and join Kirk Hackbarth as he and the team break down the election results from the UK. All right. A couple of other stories here that we have to go over. And to be sure, I see that we are getting a lot of calls. We're getting a lot of calls. I want to make sure that you're leaving a voicemail. We're not able to take live calls right now because of an ongoing technical issue we're having with our phone company. We do still get your phone calls, so make sure that you're leaving a voicemail. I see I get the calls to my phone here as well. So the phone lines have been lighting up, but I'm assuming they're lighting up and nobody's leaving a voicemail. So leave a voicemail. That's the only way we can get your audio on air for tonight and for the next week or so while we get the technical issue resolved. And more importantly, make sure you're leaving some comments in the comment section if you want some live feedback. In addition to the live commentary and everything else that's happening, it's going to be live blogging. So it's not live video. Live video too? Okay, so I needed to take a step back and completely correct myself. Not live video, live blogging. So Kirk, I'm sorry, I was going to put you, I don't know, Kirk, get your camera ready and do live video too, since I've already announced it. But definitely go to progressivearmy.com to get live blogging results of the UK elections. I promoted the hell out of that and I promoted the wrong thing. That's how it goes. All right, let's talk about a couple of other stories that I missed, but I think are important. The Intercept story on yesterday that we touched on briefly, there's a lot to this story. There's a story reported by Matthew Cole, Richard Esposito, Sam Biddle, Ryan Grimm. All of them are of the Intercept. Ryan Grimm also works with the Young Turks. Top secret NSA report details Russian hacking efforts days before the 2016 election. We discussed it briefly on yesterday. I want to give you a few more details on it and discuss the implications of Reality Winner being arrested potentially as a result of actions taken by the Intercept. So according to a top secret NSA report, the NSA believes that Russia military intelligence executed a cyber attack on at least one U.S. voting supplier and sent a spear phishing email to more than 100 local election officials just days before the last November's presidential election. This is directly from the Intercept. what the report does not show is the underlying or raw intelligence, but it's the analysis based on the raw intelligence. So as Reality Winner gathered this information, she was not able to get access to the raw data to back this up. This is the analysis and the conclusion of the NSA. From the report itself, Russian General Staff Main Intelligence Directorate actors executed cyber espionage operations against a named U.S. company in August 2016, evidently to obtain information on elections related to software and hardware solutions. The actors likely used data obtained from that operation to launch a voter registration themed spear phishing campaign targeting U.S. local government organizations. What the Intercept was clear on is that this top secret document made no conclusions as to whether it had any effect on the outcome of the election. So there are things that we can draw from this, and there are things that we cannot draw from this. But the assessment itself, according to the Intercept, concluded with high confidence that the Kremlin ordered an extensive, multi-pronged propaganda effort to undermine public faith in the U.S. democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. Now, on the backside of that story, or on the flip side of that story, you have the NSA, or federal authorities, announcing on yesterday that they had already arrested Reality Winner and tied her directly to the Intercept story. It was almost like simultaneous, right? On the one hand, the Intercept released their story, and then on the very next thing that happened, NBC reports that someone was in custody concerning the same exact story. It appears as though Reality Winner, who's the NSA contractor, 25-year-old from Augusta, Georgia, it appears as though she did not cover her tracks well, but there's a possibility that the Intercept did not do her any favors in terms of protecting her identity, particularly in a fashion that people like me would not have been aware of, but people who do this professionally should have known. Whether or not a photocopied version of a document reveals the dot matrix somewhat, I guess it's like your metadata information, similar to metadata information, that the NSA was able to look at the document itself and ascertain what printer it came from. Now, I would not know that the NSA was able to do that, but people who do this all day, every day, this is something that you would expect them to know. That was a piece of the puzzle that the NSA needed and federal authorities needed to to find the individual, Reality Winner, and arrest her. According to a lot of sources, according to Washington Post has an article on it. There is a post out of course, the Intercept is speaking out on it little by little, but there were a lot of things that they could not have done to protect her. One, because they didn't know who she was, but then two, there were things that she did on her end of the table that actually led them more conclusively to her, emailing the Intercept directly from her work computer. Printing this out on her work computer. There's a lot of things that happened, ultimately leading to her arrest. Now, who holds responsibility for it? At this point, that's up to their lawyers to decide. What I'm interested in is two things: the information that was released and the arguments around it right now. Because we've said time and time and again that it doesn't matter how the information comes out. We said this with regard to the DNC leaks, to the Podesta emails. Doesn't matter how it came out. What matters is what's in it. What's the substance of it? And this article suggests that the NSA has a high level of confidence that Russia did involve themselves in our election. What it does not say is that Russia affected the outcome of the election. But we are in a weird place, and I guess maybe it's weird for me and not everyone else, but it's a weird place where I'm starting to realize more and more that people have their preferred narrative that they're going to hang on to no matter what evidence comes out. I have seen people turn coat on the outlets like The Intercept, because now The Intercept is putting out information that contradicts their perspective on Russia. It's almost as though you have a group of people who, no matter what evidence is shown, they will not believe under any circumstances that Russia had any involvement in the 2016 election. And to me, that seems to be the most, I don't want to be insulting. What's the word? The most naive. That has to be the most naive perspective possible, because the baseline position of any major power in the world is to have influence over other nations in their elections, in their day-to-day, in their media, in their every aspect of a nation's existence. Competing nations intervene all the time. And so this starting position worldview of it wasn't Russia, Russia didn't have anything to do with it, to me seems to be naive. And that's being generous, right? Because we've seen, and I don't want to use a cliche where there's smoke, there's fire, but the reality of it is that the sum total of the pieces suggests that Russia did get involved in our election. Did they turn the results? I still don't believe they turned the results, and that's just a belief. I don't have any evidence to suggest one way or the other. I just don't think that they had an impact enough to actually change the outcome. Does this absolve Hillary Clinton of running a piss poor campaign? No, but I don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction to dismiss evidence that shows Russia was involved. I don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction to reject that, because Democrats are weaponizing it to say this is why they lost. It's a perfect example why we have to be ambidextrous enough to do both and. We have to use both hands at both times. We have to admit and see the writings on the wall, and to at a minimum, allow the conversation and, more importantly, the investigation to occur into Russian meddling into the 2016 election. But you have people who push back against an investigation. And the best way for us to resolve this once and for all is to have a damn investigation. And so what puts me in the weird position that I mentioned previous is the fact that the more information and evidence that comes out, the more people whose default position is, no, this is just a conspiracy theory. It's not Russia. It never was Russia. It's just the Democratic Party not want to be irresponsible. The more evidence that comes out, the more they're having to turn on organizations that put the information out. And so now The Intercept works for the government. That's the newest line. This is the newest line by some independent media, people in my space, in my world. That somehow or another, this means that The Intercept has been co-opted and they are complicit with the federal government putting out a narrative. So at what point, there is no point. And I think that is the point. There is no point for a certain group of progressives that will accept any evidence at all, because they have a vested interest in protecting their turf. And their turf says it's never Russia, it's always the Democratic Party. And the reality is showing us that, yes, it is the Democratic Party, but in this case, Russia actually was involved in our election. To the extent that we need to go to war with Russia, no. But anyone reasonable would never suggest that. And anyone unreasonable who is suggesting that, they need to be called on the carpet for it. I guess the problem is, here's the problem that I'm having, is that it's difficult to be a reasonable observer in an unreasonable time where you have half of the left-leaning perspective in America shouting that it was nothing but the Russians and that's the only reason they lost. And then the other half saying the Russians couldn't possibly have done anything because America is really the bad guy in everything. Unreasonable times, and here I am just trying to be reasonable and say, can we just have a damn investigation, a thorough investigation, and whatever it says, and whatever it doesn't say, it does not say. Let's take a listen to our first voicemail of the night and see what this caller has to say.
Hey, it's me, Scotty from Columbus, Ohio. and I wanted to say about the Bill Maher House nigger controversy. Doesn't surprise me. He's always kind of had that kind of white liberal who thinks that he has a past because he listens to hip hop and has an affinity for black women. And I remember in particular Corinne Superhead Steffens saying that he had this very, should we say, like hostile attitude and like very condescending attitude. And another ex-girlfriend had said that he did sort of use it, but she didn't go as far as saying that. So, keep up the good work, man.
Hey, Scotty, thanks so much for the call. Again, you guys can leave, or you all can leave conversations, 857-600-0518. I'm burned out on Bill Maher. Go check out my videos from yesterday. I believe exactly what Scotty is saying. That is the attitude and the disposition of Bill Maher. And at some point, like I've said twice before, I'm going to say it a third time, sometimes it seems like the only way Democrats are going to admit that their beloved Bill Maher is actually a racist is if he registers as Republican. Because if he did the same exact thing as a Republican that he's done as a Democrat, he would be off the air and labeled a bigot and relegated to the dregs of society. One last story for the night, and we'll get out of here. This is an interesting story that shows you the depth of the Trumps' lust for money. I guess that's the best way to describe this. So it appears as though that Donald Trump has been funneling money from a children's charity. So according to Forbes, last September, the Trump family held the Eric Trump Foundation Golf Invitational. Eric Trump is on the screen behind me. Eric Trump hosts that charity every year in support of St. Jude's. I'm actually a supporter of St. Jude as well. Since the family owns the golf course, according to Forbes, where all the proceeds, they designed it so that all the proceeds would go to the charity. And this was the expectation. However, according to Trump, according to the report, $100,000 of the donations were funneled through Eric Trump Foundation back into the golf course to pay for expenses incurred during the tournament. And so while people are donating this money underneath the belief that because we're doing it at a Trump property, all of the funds will eventually go to St. Jude's, in actuality, the Eric Trump Foundation had to pay the Donald Trump Foundation, or the Donald Trump golf courses rather, in order to utilize the facilities. Now, in any normal exchange, this would not be a surprise. However, as a part of the promotion, it was the expectation that because they were using the Trump properties, they were able to use it for free. And the guests were explicitly told that all of the money would go to charity. So it's the deception that increased the level of contributions when in reality, $100,000 of the dollars went directly to the Trump golf course. More than $500,000 of money from donors over 10 years was redonated to other charities, including some that included Trump family members. According to Forbes, Trump himself told the Trump organization to start billing the Eric Trump Foundation for the expenses incurred. So this is not some low-level executive running the golf course saying, no, you still need to pay for this, Eric. This is the president of the United States. He wasn't president at the time, telling the Eric Trump Foundation, I need you to pay for these expenses. So this is kind of the nature this is the true nature of the Trump family. This is how they have enriched themselves in the past. And this is in many ways how they are enriching themselves now with tax dollars. Every time Donald Trump goes to Mar-a-Lago, every time Donald Trump goes to any of his golf courses, every time he goes to his properties in West Palm Beach, Florida, and he takes Air Force One and he takes the entire entourage, tax dollars are being funneled back into the Trump properties. And not only is he willing to do this with United States tax dollars, he's willing to do this with people who are giving out of the abundance of their heart to the St. Jude Foundation. He's willing to charge them in the same fashion and have that money funneled back into his coffers. That's all we have for you tonight. Have a great night, and we'll see you on tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good night.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.